Back to the Nutrimedical report. We have Bob Vineyard, and we have, of course, a banner basically right up there in the front at Nutrimedical under Associates for the Pure Water Systems. If you log in through that code and use the code Nutrimed, N-U-T-R-I-M-E-D, you're going to save 10% on all their systems. The Bev 100 countertop, Bev 300 under-the-counter 5-gallon reserve tank, the Bev 200 tackle box system for base stations for prepper people that want to get, say, a turtle tough shelter or be in a remote area, and the whole host system, which is the best in the world. Please don't Google me or send information saying, we've got a better system than yours, Deagle. No, you don't. And I can prove it to you. And in fact, if you want to call in and say, we got a Berkey, we got a, I call energy vampire, to pulling the air out of the water, out of the air, or some other system, I can prove to you toxicologically you don't know what you're talking about, and the water you're drinking is laced to the gunnels with radiotoxins, chemicals, JPA jet fuel, including even in distillation systems. None of these will take out all the toxins, such as the pure water system. In fact, this was designed for laboratories to create reagent-grade, we call certifiable water, so the biological and chemical and other experiments could not be screwed up by contaminating toxins. So please don't waste your time trying to say, Deagle, we have something better, or listening to other people who think they're experts. They aren't. They're all fools that don't know what they're talking about. So if you find that offensive, too bad. It's just the way it is. And some people, it was interesting, I was talking to my board up today, John, he said, some people don't like being told they're wrong. Well, guess what? If you think you have a better system, you're just wrong. Hi, Kels. That's my daughter.
Hi, Dad.
Yeah, okay, Kels.
Say bye to later.
Yeah, we'll see you later, honey. I'll bring you later, okay?
Yeah.
So, Bob, tell us about the pure water system. What makes your system so superior, and why do people think? And I know people I call looky-loos will say, well, yeah, I want to look over the system. Oh, well, I don't know if we should get this, dear. I'm thinking, how much toxins do you want to drink? Do you want some doctor to look over the top of his glasses 5 years from now and saying, I'm sorry you have a lymphoma, hairy cell lymphoma. I'm sorry you've got brain cancer. I'm sorry you have breast cancer from all the toxins you've been drinking in your water supply. You tell us about the system and why people, for some delusional reason, think they can drink tap water at a restaurant, or drink regular water, or even bathe in water that doesn't have the trihalomethanes and other trichloroethylene and other toxic halides in the water, destroying their biology, and they wonder why they're going to stay healthy. I'm thinking, why? Why do people believe that? I mean, it's beyond me. I don't understand it.
Dr. Bill, I've been doing this now since 1984, so I've been at it for a while, and it always has baffled me. I'm with you. Is that to me the very basic idea that they have to poison the water in order to deliver it to you safely should tell you something. I mean, you don't have to. I mean, what kind of a mental exercise is required to figure out if they're poisoning it to deliver it to me to make it quote unquote drinkable? Then why did they put poison in there? So just on the very first level of water purification, just the very first step, I want to take out the poison they put in there. That would be get rid of the chlorine. Now, I can point to places, and you can do research on the web, and you can see that there's an awful lot of evidence that says that, long-term exposure to chlorine is pretty detrimental. Now, they just put in a tiny bit, and I granted, potable water has done more for the developed world, certainly, than when you look at what happens in the third world when they don't have it. But that still says to me, I want to get rid of the poison before I drink it. Because if it's poison enough to kill off the bugs, well, what's inside my gut? My gut is full of all kinds of bugs, stuff that's important for me in order to digest my food, to break down food, etc. And so we don't want to disturb the intestinal flora by drinking big glasses of chlorinated water. And here's the other thing. When the chlorine reacts with organic material, i.e. the bugs that they're trying to kill, it produces carcinogenic byproducts. And those are part of what's regulated by the EPA for everything that shows up in your water. So it can only have X amount of chlorine, because too much is detrimental. According to them, I think any is detrimental. But when the chlorine reacts with organic molecules, it produces HHAs, haloacetic acids, trihalomethanes. Both are proven carcinogens. And so those are supposed to be regulated and not reach certain levels in your water. Well, so now I've got poison in my water, and I got the byproducts of poisoning my water, all of which are carcinogenic. So shouldn't take a huge mental exercise, or you shouldn't have to engage too many neurons in order to figure out that that's bad for you. And that's not going to be good for your long-term health. And we haven't even begun to discuss all the other contaminants that exist in the water and what happens when the chlorine reacts with those. If when it reacts with organic molecules, it produces carcinogens, what happens when it reacts with radioactivity? What happens when it reacts with heavy metals? We don't know what all these little combinations, this little toxic soup that we create, and it varies from town to town. One town's going to have a toxic soup that looks one way, and another town's going to have another, because water's different everywhere. And so the idea that you can go out and get a carbon filter that's going to get rid of all these dangerous, potential toxic combinations, well, that's foolish to think that that's going to work. And reverse osmosis, for as good of a system as it is, and the major improvement it'll give you in your water quality, it has its drawbacks. It's not good at some things, like nitrates and nitrites. Well, I don't know what nitrates and nitrites do when they blend with chlorine. Or other molecules, boron, borates. These are molecules that reverse osmosis only gets rid of about 50% of, and fluoride. It doesn't get rid of all the fluoride. In fact, the curve for fluoride is different from the other molecules that reverse osmosis gets rid of. So the idea that there's a one type of purification that's going to do it all. Even distillation doesn't do it all, because some of those will distill with the water and condense with the water and just be concentrated in the water. And so there is no one method that's available that gets rid of all kinds of contaminants. And so Pure Water Systems made it simple. We just said, hey, what do we do for laboratories? Because when we put a system in a research lab, if we screw up and their water doesn't pass the standards that we said it would pass, they're suing us. And we can't afford to be liable for that kind of, we can't afford that kind of liability. So guess what? We use carbon, reverse osmosis, and deionization. In a lab, we back it up with some redundant process, but we take those core technologies, carbon, reverse osmosis, deionization, we put those in a residential unit. You can't find that combination anywhere else. And that's the most effective combination to get rid of the most types of contaminants to the highest degree possible that you're going to find in any residential application. And sure, it's a little more expensive than the other guys, but that's because it costs a lot of money to make this stuff. And to put it together, and the research that we did to figure out how much of this ion do we, because we use what we call a stoichiometric ratio of cation to anionic resins in our deionization. Why do we do that? Because we know that the RO has certain ions that it doesn't do very effectively, so we balanced it out. Well, it took a long time to get that right. So the Pure Water Systems, granted, you'll have a little bit of a capital investment in your health that you're going to make once, and then you're going to have the best water purification system for the rest of your days, for you, your family, and for anybody that comes around that you want to share it with. The food you cook, baby formula, everything is going to be vastly improved, not to mention the detoxification in your body is going to be ramped way up, because you're drinking pure water, and water's not important for what it brings, it's important for what it carries away. It does more to get the stuff out of you that's already in there.
Exactly.
It's been storing up.
You can't detox without pure water. We'll have Professor McCanney calling back in shortly, so we'll continue our dialogue. Really interesting discussions today, and we talked about the KOLBRIN Bible, people wanted it's interesting and funny questions people would ask. What version of Bible? I go back to the original Hebrew and Greek letters and words and read word by word, which gives you a much more clear understanding of them. And when you use the Green's Interlinear, it's by far the best in terms of looking at the original Hebrew and Greek. And then if you look at the KOLBRIN, it gives you a historical connection back to the fact that, that Moses was a scientist, he was a physician, and he was a general. He was being trained as the next Pharaoh. His name Moses means the one who was drawn out of, who was supposed to be lineally the next Pharaoh, even though he was adopted by the Pharaoh's daughter. So the inbreeding, of course, of the Pharaohs had led to some very inferior children, and of course that's the reason why Moses was selected to become the next Pharaoh, because he was a superior person. When he understood the star signs, he knew there was a cataclysm coming, because it was been prophesied and connected with ancient prophecies by the high priests who had been studying the star signs and knew that the approach of this object, which we call Venus, the comet, was involved directly with the pillar of fire and the pillar of smoke, etc., that they were monitoring and following in the desert. So these are really interesting things that people should start to grasp. We're heading a time of cataclysm again. This time of cataclysm is going to lead to not only a 5% reduction in the magnetic field of the Earth, but the environmental dangers of things like Fukushima Daiichi, which is destroying the ozone layer, increasing the damage to crops, and disturbing the plasma physics of weather systems. People need to be aware of the changes in what are called solar and galactic weather, because it affects planetary weather and plasma physics. Not what they... Professor McCanney, you're back. It's good to have you back. We were talking about the KOLBRIN Bible. We were talking about some of the astrophysics you explain and your wing generator program in the first segments last hour, which is crowdfunded. So you mentioned also the Mars colony, which they're talking about in 2035. They've bifurcated civilization. And this bifurcation process started thousands of years ago with the high priests of the ancient world, such as the high priests that trained Moses and Sumer in Egypt and these ancient world. But in the modern incarnation of it, it's the secret agencies, the NSA, the British MI5 and MI6, Canadian Security Intelligence Services. All these agencies were actually conceived by the Nazi Germans to have a super agency they call the Omega Project, which, by the way, was completed by George Bush Sr. in 1982. People need to be aware that the secret agencies are like the modern version of what are called Tier 1 science. It's sequestered away, whether it's DARPA. I call it the No Such Agency. The NSA budget, by the way, is hundreds of times bigger than the CIA. And the CIA budget is bigger than all the other secret agencies on the planet. So you can just imagine how large the No Such Agency's budget is if it's that big. Can you give us some kind of insight into how this, what I call this disturbed and what I call false science, is putting the human race in danger?
Well, yeah, and what do they want to do? NASA has announced, let's review this, NASA has announced that they plan to put a man on Mars in 2035. Okay, so that's 20 years from now. They want to get funding for this, and in the meantime, all you're going to see is a bunch of pretty pictures and artists' conceptions of what they're going to do. This is not science. They started animating the space program, the unmanned space program, back in the 80s, and they do more animation than Disney does. But the problem here is that in the meantime, they want to put one man on Mars, or three men, or something like that, or two men and a woman and a black guy. You know, just to this. I mean, but how absurd to think that, you know, we're supposed to wait 20 years to put a couple men on Mars, which will do absolutely nothing for the human race.
Right.
And also one of the big problems is that they have to send all of the supplies from Earth. These people are not learning how to live in space. It would be like sending the pioneers across to settle the Great West and having to supply them from New York City. That's about as stupid as this program is. And how many aerospace executives are going to go into outer space? Well, none of them. They're going to sit back here and make money. That's what it's all about.
Right.
But the other thing that it's all about, NASA is about not anything in space agency.
Nothing, I like that.
Nothing in space agency.
Nothing in space agency. That's good.
And so what they're doing is wasting time resources, and we have to get large volumes of people off this planet to conserve the species, because eventually this Earth is going to get labeled and it's going to wipe everybody back to the cave ages unless, in mass, we have 100,000 of million people that can actively go into outer space.
Yeah, we should actually, I know this from the space projects, there are actually 5 planets and or moons that are planned. They talk for geoengineering them to terraform them into Earth-like atmospheres and environments for human populations. And there's no reason at all why we can't be, right now, mapping out the wormholes across the cosmos so that we can do faster-than-light travel to near-star systems and start opening up the 100 billion planets in the Goldilocks zone that actually could inhabit human life. So we may be at the start of what I call the Project Battlestar Galactica, in we call the distant ancient past for the galaxy, in a sense, where in fact 1,000 years from now there could be 100 million planets inhabiting human populations or the descendants of humans, which as time goes on will diverge in their own ways of controlling their own human, I'm not talking about evolution, but punctuated recreation, where we become the co-creators of the future versions adapted to the particular worlds so that we go to. That's going to happen, and the fact is that the globalists who want to control that whole process, they don't want us to realize what they've already done.
Right. The thing is, we have to have a complete change of power on this planet. Excuse me. We have to have the globalists, the bankers. We have to get rid of these people once and for all, because there are so many good things, positive things that can be done, and they're destroying. They're destroying everything for everybody. I mean, this is right now. This is their sandbox. They want to be in control of everything, and let's face it, these people are evil. We have to put them on a boat, send them out the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a boat bigger than the Titanic, and pull the plug and sink it. And all of the supporting staff.
Well, we're probably no more than 5 to 20 years max to age we call zero senescence, which means basically human beings will no longer need to die or age. Number 2, we're basically already have technology for tokamak fusion energy, and your wing project will basically produce zero oxygen consuming, limitless power for any nation, even remote areas of the world that require power. And what's happening now is our current money system basically is not based on the dollar or even electronic currency, it's based on energy. And when populations have limitless energy, and we don't geoengineer the climate to cause destruction and famine and drought, and we re-terraform the Earth so it supports other species, including us, like the North American Water Power Project, we can have a stable ecosystem, and we become a steward of a stable Earth that's safe without war, without pestilence, and without consuming oxygen to generate energy. Report, and Professor McCanney, you've got an amazing link up there on the front page at a banner ads for all your books, videos, DVDs, and so on. And the KOLBRIN Bible, you also have that available. Is that available as a physical book or as kind of like a download or a disc?
I do not personally sell the KOLBRIN. I have a link that you can follow. It's to the KOLBRIN, I believe KOLBRIN Trust. It's on my website.
Yeah, if you go to the link there, in other words, you can go follow that link and you can purchase it or get it there or download it, right?
Yeah, it's a big, beautiful book. It's a giant book with a embossed. It's like the old style, very thick cover book. And I warn people, do not get the KOLBRIN that's on the Amazon. That's a farce. It's done by a guy named Marshall Masters, who claims he wrote it. It's just
Marshall Masters, I've had Marshall on, and he is how can I say it? He takes things way out of context. He does called disturbing or disturbed false to tier 1 science. He was a journalist who was working for some media companies and so on, and he doesn't have the training in astrophysics, and he's made some really outlandish claims. And what do you think about Marshall?
Well, he's made about 50 claims that Planet X was here. He claims to have a research telescope in Costa Rica, which cannot even see the part of the sky he's talking about. The guy is goofy. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. And he claimed that the world was going to end December 21st, 2012, and he's still here. You know, I mean, he's still walking around making ridiculous claims. He has no scientific background. He copies my work and then distorts it, and that's, you have to understand, that's why he's there.
Right.
A person like this could not exist in a normal world. So
Right.
he's being backed by the CIA. He's got money coming in under the table. There's some stories I have about the KOLBRIN itself, but the real authors of the KOLBRIN came over to confront him, and the CIA was there to confront them in his stead. So yeah,
Oh, really?
anyway, he's a nobody, but they like these people because they're crackpots, and they can put them up and be front people for their operations.
Well, he's also constantly so what I call screaming wolf. That it's imminent that they can see the incoming dwarf star, and there's absolutely no evidence that anything he said or any of the videos or materials he's put up is true. And the fact is, there are action at a distance, as you've said on your show and on John Moore's show and on this program, that there is hyperelliptical comets and there is deep space object that's at least 0.73 light years out, but there's no evidence it's in the inner solar system at all. And so when I hear this kind of
made over 50 predictions. And anyway, that's a long story, but yeah, basically, not worth discussing much more than that. And then the guy is a front person, like many. If you look at his book titles, he's got like Planet X and the KOLBRIN Connection. He copies my book titles.
Really?
He took the KOLBRIN. He started out by Xeroxing it and selling it, and then created his own version, claiming he was the author. I mean, the guy is an idiot.
Wow.
And a fake and a fraud. So, I mean...
that's important. And we had him on for a few times, and then he got himself in trouble. And I think we actually had some discussions going on with some other experts like Jonathan Gray, who's an ancient archaeologist and a very good scientist, and Tim Alexander, our geopolitical historian, who's a professor. And Marshall got himself into trouble, and they started actually getting really vicious when we talked about, Sabbatean Judaism, etc. And most people don't realize that many of the modern Jews, there's basically a split, starting several centuries ago with Shabtai this Palestinian anti-Messiah that turned every commandment upside down. And about 70 years later, Jakob Frank, who actually made a deal with the Bauer family, who literally changed their name to Rothschild or Rothschild. The Rothschilds set up the banking system for the world. And, of course, they work directly as proxies under the Vatican. Most people don't realize all financial systems on Earth are directly controlled by the Vatican. The Vatican has control of all the Jewish bankers, including in Russia and China. They're all controlled from the Vatican. People say, no. And they're not just controlled from the white pope, they're controlled by the black pope. So the current black pope is the master of all financial systems on Earth. People think, no, you're exaggerating, including the head of the World Council and churches. And the United Nations even has designated the only person that can bring a new super-religion to the planet to bring about some united rationality in terms of what's acceptable religious belief systems is the current pope, and that's by the words of the United Nations. So people say, do they see the rise of an anti-pope? You betcha. You see the rise of an antichrist leader in the abomination that desolates, that's even his name in the White House? You betcha. We see the rise of a leader in Russia that's not going to put up with this stuff. We see the rise of Vladimir Putin, who doesn't drink vodka. And the Russians and Chinese are totally fed up with what's going on here in the West, and they're not going to play this game much longer, and that's freaking out the bankers because they want total control. And these people are what I call Eastern European Yiddish thugs who think everyone else is a soulless dog and they're the only super race on the planet and they're going to crush us all. And, of course, the stupid Christians think they're all going to get raptured away. Well, they quote the Sabbatean Jews will run the world, and nothing could be further from the truth. So people need to understand this.
Exactly right. I mean, that's a great summary of exactly what's going on.
Yeah, and of course, I can say this because I'm of Hebrew descent. On my mother's side, they're direct blood descended from Moses through the name Naamah, because the Naomi family married a descendant of the king, of the daughter of the king of the Medes when they were about to meet of Persia 2,800 years ago. And I can tell you, Maronite Christians from the first century, because my ancestor was a Cohen Gadol, a head Cohen at the Sanhedrin, and a cohort of Joseph of Arimathea, who was a follower of Yeshua, Jesus. So people need to understand that I have creds, in other words, biological and genetic creds to say that the current people that run the state of Israel are not, as Jesus would say, they are the synagogue of Satan. And the globalist maniacs could care less because they're actually preparing the population of Israel to be a human sacrifice. So anybody living in Israel, if you're listening to this, and I had a Jewish, actually, anesthesiologist call me last week and give me great detail how he believed everything I'm saying. He's an anesthesiologist right in Israel. His parents live in America, and he's freaked out, and he knows everything I'm saying is exactly true, and he wants to get out because he's a believer now in Yeshua Jesus, and he knows that the place is getting prepared to be destroyed. Israel, if you're living in Israel right now and you're not getting out, you're going to die, because when they start this war up, everybody in Israel will be a human sacrifice except for those people in bunkers. And anybody of wealth or power is already getting themselves out of the state of Israel.
And if you don't think they'll sacrifice their own kind for an end, you're wrong.
Oh, yeah. In fact, this is why they've even predicted, going way back over a century ago, that there were going to be 6 million Jews killed, and 6 million... The total number of Jews killed even during... And by the way, there was starvation because we starved them by destroying their crops. And so even the German troops only had potatoes and water. The diseases that happened there, and we don't even know that the so-called ovens that they talk about when they incinerated the bodies, they didn't have enough coal or material to even burn the bodies, because if you actually go and look at the cost of it, of energy it takes to incinerate a human body, the Germans didn't have them in these so-called ovens and the so-called death camps to do it. They were trying to sterilize the population from typhus and from lice, etc., and because of the spread of disease and pestilence because of starvation. And when they had this thing called Arbeit macht krank, the Germans had sabotaged what's called the segments of the Jewish population that actually had made alliances with the Nazis, because 122,000 Nazi SS were sabotaging atheistic Jews that followed Shabtai and the anti-Messiah. People don't know this. They think it's all lies, and if I said this in Canada, I would be immediately arrested for telling the truth. Because that's what Canada is about. It's a communist, totalitarian state, like most other countries like Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. If I said this truth elsewhere, you're going to the big house, Deagle. We can't have you tell the truth. Too bad. Listen worldwide, you're hearing. And people think, Dr. Deagle, you're a wild man. No, you have no idea how angry I can get. I have the anger of my ancestor Moses. I have the intellectual power of Archimedes and Moses and Einstein. And I can tell you, when I have geniuses like Professor McCANNEY, who comes on and show and tells you the truth about the biblical truth about cataclysms and science, tier 1 science, and we present you with classified facts that you're not going to hear. And we do have, by the way, classified contacts and other people, but we have a brain. And most of the material, for example, you can read your own KOLBRIN Bible if you go to the links. And by the way, I went to the link page and I found 5 different words, KOLBRIN, K-O-L-B-R-I-N, KOLBRIN spelled as K. Which of those links is the one that gives you the link to the book?
It's KOLBRIN. I'm going to go there myself right now while we're talking.
Yeah, it says complete book list, and it says a KOLBRIN connection. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, that's my personal book.
Right, and then there's another one that says order complete ebook set. Atlantis to Tesla, the KOLBRIN connection. That's your book there, and then of course
that's my
there's
book.
another link to
the link to my the link on my page to the KOLBRIN. Let me find that. You know, I used to have it right in the middle. Oh, oops, there it is. It's in the middle column. Okay, it's under. It says it's in white letters in the middle column. My homepage, jmccsci.com.
Oh, maybe it's not on my page.
Real stories about, and then it says, note, the only legitimate source for the KOLBRIN is the web internet www site chaldeantrust.org.
Chaldean Trust, okay, that's CHALDEAN trust.org. Chaldeantrust.org, yeah. So the Chaldean Trust, oops, that one didn't show up for some reason or other. Chaldean, how do you spell that again? CHALDEAN. CULDIAN. Oh, CUL. Oh, so CH.
No, CH, no. CUL.
CUL.
DIAN trust.org.
Oh, Chaldean trust. Okay.
Chaldean,
That's spelled very differently.
Chaldean. That,
well, that one didn't spell right either.
CULD maintains what was left of the Library of Joseph of Arimathea. And the KOLBRIN is bits and pieces of what they have. And much of it was burned in the Abbey at England back in the Middle of the Ages. The Roman army went out to burn it down, which they did, but they got most of the books out, and then after the fire they went back and picked up some of the shreds, and these are still what are maintained by the...
I got the right spelling here, so I'm going to give it out to people. It's CULDIAN trust.org. CULDIAN, Chaldean trust.org, and that's it's a social network, and it gives you the actual link to get the KOLBRIN Bible. That's important.
Yes, absolutely. And there's another, the book of the Kalides is also another book, but the KOLBRIN is the book that you want. And let me tell you, you open that up and start reading it, your hair will stand on the back of your neck.
Right.
And the reason they sent it to me back in the early 90s when this was first published is because they knew who I was, and they said, Jim McCanney can interpret this for us.
Right.
And that's, but anyway, basically, they talk about the comets. And something I had always said is there were more than one comet that was in the sky at one time. Not all of them came close to Earth. But these were doing battle in the sky. And so, I mean, these people talk about, they call them the sky monsters, but obviously they're comets. And
right.
They talk about the effect on the human race and the disasters. And if you corroborate this with, for example, the Mayan or the Chinese or the India, if you talk about the phoenix or the thunderbird or whatever name it was given, Quetzalcoatl, in the ancient societies, they all correspond to the planet Venus as it went through the solar system as a large comet, becoming the planet Venus eventually. And that's what the Moses story, and that's why I say the Bible that we see today has been edited. All of this has been edited out. And so that's why I encourage people to look at the KOLBRIN, because here's the thing. If you look, for example, at what Christ was teaching, and he was a very educated dude. Where did he become educated? Well, his great uncle was Joseph of Arimathea. That was Mary's uncle, and he's
which means he was actually one of the seniors of the
crucifixion and asked for the body. But anyway, after that, he moved to England and took his library and a lot of other artifacts with him. It's believed that the cross is in England still in hiding, that nobody's been able to find it yet. But anyway, the KOLBRIN is bits and pieces of the Library of Joseph of Arimathea that have been preserved. And just another note, I said, do not go to Amazon. The way Marshall Masters got the book is I got another copy of the KOLBRIN for a person who was a friend, and a joker named Glenn Kimball conned him into giving the book. He said, I just want to see it once. So Glenn Kimball, who was a buddy of Marshall Masters, got the book and started Xeroxing it and selling it. Eventually, Kimball died. I don't know what he died from. But Marshall Masters got the book, basically Xerox copied it, printed it, and changed it, and then started selling the Marshall Masters author of the KOLBRIN. Yeah, like Marshall Masters wrote a book that's from 2,500 years ago. You know, what a clown. But anyway, the real book is from this ChaldeanTrust.org. And like I say, I know that they came to confront Masters in the United States, and the CIA basically targeted them when they got here. And these are just regular people. I mean, they're not high-powered. It's not like they have fleets of attorneys. And they were intimidated, and so the Marshall Masters imitation one. But if you look, what's important is when you look at the Marshall Masters one, on the cover is a big orange ball. and he talks about Planet X and makes it into a goofy topic,
Right.
just the same as Nancy Leader, crazy CIA front lady who supposedly talks to aliens, on the front of her book predicting that May 15th, 2003, the world was supposed to end by the death of this Planet X object, had a big orange ball on the cover of hers, and all of these other disinformation people, I say they're people with their hat on backwards, with the baseball hat on backwards. There must be a dozen authors who have written Planet X books on the cover, and they're all from the same publishing house because they have all the same printing technology. On the cover, inevitably, they have a big orange ball, and that's so that people somehow image Planet X with a big orange ball, and it's not. It's going to look like a comet. And so anyway, that's the short version there. I could go on and on.
Right. It also teaches, by the way, a lot more of what I call the metaphysics of the nature of reality, which is in the KOLBRIN. If I recall, and I want you to correct me on this, but because it was brought off to England, it became hidden among the Celtic peoples of the British Isles. And I think during a time of darkness, it was actually brought off to Ireland. Is that right?
What I understand is it was in the Abbey in England, and we don't really know exactly where they took it after the Abbey was burned, but it probably was Ireland.
That's what I'd heard, actually, from my sources, that this goes back to the story about Patrick. You talk about St. Paddy's Day. People don't understand that England fell to a bunch of pagan hordes, and Christian England and Scotland fell to pagans, and the gospel was brought back to England and Scotland and to Europe by the monks of Ireland that actually had the KOLBRIN and actually had the ancient documents that brought it back to England, Scotland, and to Europe. So there's a re-evangelization of the British Isles by the Irish that knew about the KOLBRIN back then. That's what I'd heard.
That sounds...
Yeah, it was, believe it or not, those Irish fighters that brought it back.
Interesting. Probably some ancestors of McCANNEY.
There you go. And I've got lots of Irish background. They're the, as I say, all the wives of Iceland were Irish ladies who were brought off by the Vikings to found the place of Iceland. Believe it or not, they're all Irish.
Oh, interesting.
Half Irish. Very interesting. Hey, always Irish girls. And of course, they threw off the financial system this year and told the bankers of the world to go to Valhalla.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I love those.
Interesting. Well, amazing show. We'll have you back on Friday. Take care, and back in a moment with hour number 3. Tim Alexander.